I don't know if Uncle Bernie's going to run again.
It doesn't look like it. And he's out here, all due respect, all due respect. But there was one person, was it, that didn't vote to expand NATO today? And it wasn't Bernie. It wasn't even a leftist. You know, this is what people are talking about. If anything, I'm called every day on the internet like some kind of sap for the squad, and I have my elite sensibilities, and that's why I defend them and all of this stuff. Like, that's what I'm charged with. But honestly, I'm much closer to the people who are over it than the people who aren't. I'm just trying to make sure that I make the case for that in a way that can be heard and doesn't seem like I'm jumping to conclusions and being and attacking squad members in bad faith. I want there to be an opportunity for them to come forward and say, well, this is why I couldn't act. This is why I didn't act, or I'm sorry, I made a mistake, all those kinds of things. The door for me is still open to that. But the reality on the ground, India, what happened to you? What happened to you seems to be the strongest evidence that one can even come up with about how futile this process is. I mean, how are you not? I mean, maybe you are, but like, I feel like I would be absolutely livid and completely demoralized if I had won my Democratic primary, a tough Democratic primary, where all of the interests were aligned against you. Against a 30-year incumbent? How long have he been in office?
16 years.
16-year incumbent, sorry. They're all...
Well, he's been in office for like 30 years. He was a senator and a council person, yeah.
And then they pull this, and not only do they pull this, who had your back? Who more broadly came out and said that this was wrong and that they supported you? Look, I'm not trying to be messy. And I know that Senator Turner spoke to her people and they all had an understanding about who was, she wasn't expecting them to come out and be critical of this. But when the Congressional Progressive Caucus came out and endorsed Shontel Brown against her, the Congressional Progressive Caucus, where all of these squad members are members, led by Pramila Jayapal, came out and endorsed Shontel Brown. Like, at what point, India? Like, you are at the eye of this particular storm. You have really suffered the slings of arrows, and more personally than almost anybody in this kind of context, and have seen firsthand the failure of the Democratic Party to stand up for its own ideals. And I absolutely don't want Joe to be on the ticket in 2024. But there are a lot of people who are going to say, do I care about the Democratic ticket at all? Because I'm more interested in Green Party, Forward Party, MPP, whatever it is, Libertarian. I don't know what people's business is.
The one thing is I don't have the luxury of being disenchanted. I have children who are probably going to have children and give me grandchildren. So I have to continue to be in this fight. I am looking for land in Belize.
But the fight, this is the thing that it's not fighting. It's whether or not this is the fight, whether it's, a fight over the Democratic Party, or if it's a fight to have another party reign supreme, to destroy the Democratic Party.
You know that I work for the Working Families Party, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm officially WFP. And I do believe that a third party can support and elect champions of working class people. And that's what I've been spending the last 7 months doing and figuring out for myself. And when you ask, like, who was the champion, right? When the Democrats abandoned me, even though I was the duly elected Democratic nominee, the people who supported me was the Working Families Party, right? Like, they were the champions. They were the ones who added capacity and support to the campaign, to my campaign. And, I owe a debt of gratitude to the Working Families Party, but also just trying to figure out strategically how we take that power and move it up the ladder, right? From school board to city council races, to state leg races, to Congress, to the highest office in the nation is, I think, what we really should be striving for.
Other than WFP, did any other New York Democrats reach out to you?
I mean, yeah, Schumer and Gillibrand did. They both endorsed pretty late in the election. a lot of New York City based people did. I had a couple. Well, I know I didn't have a couple. I had one county legislator, April Baskin, another Black woman who sits on the Erie County um, legislature here in Buffalo, endorsed. So there were some established Democrats who were in support. John Rivera, our assembly person, Sean Ryan, our state senator, was supportive. Um,
When you say, supportive, what is that? Does that mean a private phone call, or were they out there kind of stumping for you, fundraising for you, hustling for you?
these people who I'm naming were like out there, right? And Buffalo's the kind of place where, like, if you're out there for the opposition, you risk being canceled by the Democratic establishment. So, like, these are people who put it all on the line, um, on the count of me, my campaign, and the things that we collectively believed in. So I'll never forget that. I do appreciate it. And yeah, they're true blue.
What does it look like to get canceled locally in that way? What are the stakes for folks who stick their necks out?
Well, I can't speak for them, but for me, it looks like how it's always been being India Walton, right? Little Black girl from the Black side of town, just not being invited, right? Like not being in the inner circle, not being considered leadership, having decisions made on top of you and not being included. Um, that's what it's like for average folk here, and that's what I imagine it would be like to be canceled by the Democratic establishment here. So I'm hoping and praying that anyone who supported me is not having that experience, but it's been my experience all along, so it doesn't really matter.
Yeah. I mean, would it have been helpful to have, and would you have wanted to have the support of some of these high profile New York squad members, Mondaire Jones, AOC, Jamal Bowman?
Well, AOC was here. AOC came. It was meaningful, and I mean, even you know having a phone call with Ilhan Omar talking about my security detail and what it's like to receive death threats and how to go about life being careful, was very meaningful. And I think the outpouring of support that I received running a race in a place like Buffalo, where there's not a lot of attention given to it generally, and the amount of support that I did receive, phone calls from Bernie, Nina Turner came to town, you know.
Is this, but after you won your primary, like during the write-in, Mayor Brown's write-in campaign, that's the period of time I'm curious about. What happened? What did it feel like on the ground when it became clear that your win wasn't going to be treated like a win? And because it's one thing when the establishment comes out against the establishment candidate, it's another, because they use all of these excuses like, we're gonna, of course we're gonna protect the incumbent, da, da, da. Like they say those kinds of things as a cover for not actually wanting the progressive candidate to win. But once you've won, all of those excuses that basically amount to, oh, we always fall in line for the Democrat, go out the window. And he was kind of flagrantly in violation of good form. And at that point, what were people saying?
I got more support after I won the primary than I did before. And actually, the endorsement from Chuck Schumer and Kirsten Gillibrand came after the primary win, not before. And before everyone had the reason of staying neutral. It was a primary, right? They weren't going to support one person one way or another, but we knew that the establishment was behind the incumbent. That's how it works. Once I won the primary, there were lots of people who came out in support, despite the fact that Jay Jacobs, the leader of the Democratic Party in New York State, likened me to David Duke, right? There were still like high profile.
What is that comparison? What is the analogy? I don't get it.
He said something like, well, if David Duke ran, we wouldn't endorse him. So why would we endorse India Walton?
Oh, because you're similarly radical. That's the idea.
I suppose. But, you know, the people who mattered to me came out, right? Like, I can't even list the names of all of the folks who supported the people who came to Buffalo and like knocked on actual doors with me, um, to ensure that we had a good fight. So, you know, while I'm disappointed, I'm not upset and I'm not surprised because status quo and the encapsulation and enclosement of power is going to do what it has to do to make sure that it stays that way.
Well, now that it does look like, because now senior Democrats are saying it, now that it does look like Biden, frankly, isn't going to run. You know, how does that change the posture of, you know, the organization, of the movement? You know, and I'm also curious, you know, to the extent that you're still pushing, what tools are at your disposal to try to ensure that another person is chosen to top the Democratic presidential ticket?
Yeah, it's a little bit early still, right? We know these fields tend to get crowded fairly quickly. Um, I'm interested to see who throws their hat in the ring, but I think that for me and for a lot of folks, we have a national presence, yourself included. We have a national presence, a national audience, people who are waiting to hear what we think about candidates who are going to enter into the race. And I think that we put them through the ringer. We don't want another Joe Biden. We're not going to vote blue no matter who if our needs, our wants, and our demands are not going to be met.
Do you worry, as some people have argued, that Biden is the most electable of a potential bunch? And at the end of the day, if it is Trump again, then we're in that same situation we were in 2020, where people did feel like, even though they didn't like Joe Biden, they had to suck it up and vote blue no matter who. Like, does the, you know, are you concerned that people's fear that you might get a somebody Trump matchup where the somebody loses? You know, is that possibility causing resistance, even though people are not that fond of Biden?
I'm not concerned about that at all. I mean, I'm a person who was unelectable, and still won a primary election, right? I think that the most important part is the values that the person holds. And we have to stop putting so much weight on electability and more weight on morality, ethics, and values. And I think that right now, the American people want someone that's ethical and that has the values that are going to protect and care for all of us. I mean, that might be my rose colored glasses, but I don't think that we're going to see an era of another Trump election, um, especially if you leave it to Black women, because that's what we do.
I mean, okay, but this is the this is my concern.
It's so hard. I know.
It's not what we do. I mean, like, there are people who I think can be credibly said to have, for instance, made a huge difference in Florida. You have your, you know, Latasha Browns. You have your, you know, maybe some people say that she gets more credit than she deserves, but you're Stacey Abrams. You have your people and a million, you know, unknown individuals who knock doors and work tirelessly. And yet, once they secured the bag, either they have declined to make demands or their demands were ignored. And we don't really know which it is. Although, I hate to keep coming back to this, but that leaked tape of Biden's call with senior Black leadership from the fall of 2020, which, you know, a meeting that included Sherlyn Ifill and President NAACP and Al Sharpton.
And so there's some things that I'm going to be able to do by executive order. I'm not going to hesitate to do it. But what I'm not going to do is I'm not going to do what Anita, you probably used to get angry with me during the debates, when you'd have some of the people you were supporting said, on day one, I'm going to executive order to do this. Not within the constitutional authority. I am not going to violate the Constitution. Executive authority that my progressive friends talk about is way beyond the bounds. And as one of you said, maybe you, Reverend, now, whether it's far left or far right, there is a Constitution. It's our only hope, our only hope. And the way to deal with it is where I have executive authority, I will use it to undo every single damn thing this guy has done by executive authority. But I'm not going to exercise executive authority where it's questioned, where I can come along and say, I can do away with assault weapons. There's no executive authority to do away with that. And no one's fought harder to get rid of assault weapons than me. But you can't do it by executive order. If you do that, next guy comes along and says, well, guess what? By executive order, I'm going to say everybody can own machine guns again.
They made demands. They asked Biden for things, and Harris was sitting there too, mostly quiet, but they asked them for things. And Biden cut them off. He was brusque. He was rude. He told them that, it's time to share the stage with Latinos and that like your time in the sun is over. Like he really said all the things. And even though that call was leaked, there was no backlash. Nobody who was on the call who now had been publicly disrespected, responded by saying, yeah, we were disappointed by what happened in the meeting. They all instead fell in line and covered for Biden, which leads me to, again, not have a ton of confidence that there is an exchange here between people, who go out and manage to secure things that the Democratic Party needs, secure votes for the Democratic Party. There's no reciprocity in terms of getting things back for that hard work. It seems to be the case that Biden and Democrats, more generally speaking, think that the reward is not having Trump, and everyone needs to be comfortable with that. And I don't know. I mean, it seems to me that the principal question on the left has to be, how do you change that dynamic? Yeah.
I think that I may be a little bit of an enigma in that, like, I don't have full confidence in electoral politics. I do both, right? So I dabble in electoral politics, but like my heart is in the grassroots. My heart is in mutual aid. My heart is in coming together for collective liberation in community. So while I do see electoral politics as a means to the end, I don't see it as the end, which is why I seem like kind of because for people like me, Briahna, things don't really change, right? For working class folks, whether you're black, white, blue, Latinx, whatever, who is in the office of the presidency doesn't matter much if you're a working class person. The rich get richer, the poor get poorer. That's how this country works, right? So like, it's important to me for us to have decision-making power, especially at the hyper-local level. But over here on the side, I'm trying to help people build community land trusts, co-ops, like have true independence and collective power, like in the community. So like, I do both things at the same time. So I'm not disaffected by it, but am aware that power has to be built outside of the system that was built to keep average people, working class people, black and brown people, poor people, and at the lower edges, the fringes of society.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's right. And I think that's where a lot of people are. But again, we are, kind of talking about the context of an effort to like keep Joe from being on the ballot. So it does seem to me to be, if we are going to engage at all with electoralism, then I think that our goal should be clear and our strategy should be well developed. That's not to say that it's the be all end all, but if you're going to dip a toe, then it might as well be purposeful. Do you know what I mean? So that's all I'm pushing for. I think most folks who listen to the show at this point are kind of over electoralism as a principal agent for change. But, and this is a conversation I had with Chris Hedges and Shama Sawant. I asked them, okay, should people just ignore electoral politics altogether? They said no. And so I said, okay, then what should we do in the midterms? What's the plan? And then there was a kind of what I felt to be a little bit of a falling back on, well, electoralism isn't everything. And I'm like, okay, well, you're telling me not to ignore it. So now you have to engage with it. You can't have it both ways. We went around a bit, and obviously, I love them both. And I don't mean that as a critique, but I do sometimes feel like these are tough questions, and I don't expect anybody to kind of have answers, but here's what I would say. If we don't want Joe Biden, it's important to know who you do want. Because I know the people who are planning to replace Biden, the establishment people who are planning to replace Biden, they know who they want to replace him with. They got it at least down to 2. You know what I mean? And we're sitting here, if it's going to be AOC, then I need to be having a conversation about what she has to do to earn back the trust of some leftists that she's lost. If it's going to be Marianne, then we need to be having conversations about what she has to say to get people to believe that she can do it and, get out from under some of the stereotyping about being crystal-lated and all of that kind of stuff. And also address some stuff that she said in foreign policy context that people don't like. If it's going to be Bernie running again, then he better start acting a little differently, because he's been taking a posture for the last 2 years like he's, ready to bow out, like he's served his time, which would be fair enough. He's put in the work, but he's certainly doesn't seem battle ready. Whatever it is, work has to be done and infrastructure has to be built and consensus has to be built among the small and fragmented left media sphere. And so I would just, encourage people to be thinking along those lines. Hey, YouTube, thanks for watching. Just a reminder that this is a podcast. You can catch an extra premium episode every Monday for $5 a month at patreon.com/badfaithpodcast. That's patreon.com/badfaithpodcast for $5 a month, an extra episode every week. Additionally, please do consider liking this video, subscribing to this channel. It helps us out. It helps independent media beat the algorithm. We appreciate you. And as always, keep the faith.